Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason with Mason Works Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with one of my favorite people, Victoria Reynolds. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, Kathy. Great to see you again.
Yes. So Victoria and I are friends, and we met in LA where we both were taking a class on how to get on TV and high visibility, but we were both kind of shy. We both were kind of hiding. The teacher was kind of bullying us, and we bonded right away. And since then, here I have this show. Victoria has her own show. She's been the head of a Toastmasters club, a vital one in LA. So Victoria, a lot has changed since we met. What was that? I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
A long time ago. So tell me, you have a very important message to tell and to share with people about their own personal choice and freedom. Mm-hmm. So is that what's driving you to get out and help people right now?
Yeah, actually I had my personal spiritual awakening started in about 2009. And, it's so funny because people expect like spiritual awakening to be an instant, right? You're asleep and then you're awake. It's actually a process. We know that. Now, my first one started when I was 4 years old. So we know that they happen in stages. But I had a big one that started around 2009 because of the 2008 economic crash. We know spiritual awakenings almost always involve some kind of major breakdown, like the breakdown before the breakthrough. So my personal breakdown surrounded the 2008 economic crash. That started me on a path of spiritual enlightenment at a higher level than I had been before. And I call it my midlife rebirth, my midlife awakening. Now I call it my midlife holy shift because that's what the planet is in right now, is in the middle of a collective holy shift. And one of the messages that came in once I started channeling, I didn't even know that was a thing, but it was a gift I had when I was a child. And now looking back, I can see that as a little girl, I had the ability to understand spiritual concepts that even the adults around me couldn't grasp. It has taken me a while to understand that that's one of the gifts that I came in with, is the ability to understand spirit from a higher perspective. So about 10 years ago, this message started coming in that my role on the planet was to take on religion. Whoa. Which terrified me. I'm like, me? No, that's way too big for me. And so I sat with that for a long time because that it felt too big and it felt too scary. And so I didn't start actually talking about religion and spirituality. It went about 2011. So I wrote my first book, Transcending Fear, and that was about me overcoming the fear-based beliefs from my own childhood religion. And really starting to understand the difference between religion and spirituality and fear disguised as love, and how we have been living in a fear-based planet. And then how can we transcend that fear-based planet or transform this fear-based planet into a place of love?
Perfect.
So a lot of us have been talking about this for years, that this new loving consciousness is coming. And we were talking for years about how there's a great awakening coming. And what's fascinating is that we're now in it.
Right.
We thought it was going to be 2012, like boom, 2012, great awakening, love-based reality. And again, transformation is a process. It's not an overnight thing.
Right.
So what 2020 was the gift that created the great awakening.
Right.
So the masses of humanity are now going through the collective holy shift of the breakdown before the breakthrough. Right. That's why it's so painful for so many people, because I think for the first time ever on our planet, the entire planet is experiencing the breakdown at the same time.
Right. And all the species, every living being is sentient, and in every way, everything is reconfiguring. And so the people that don't like change, hold on to your seats, because that's what we apparently signed up for before we took these bodies, was to be here during a huge change. But Victoria, you are very courageous. I mean, the way that you've taken a stance of seeing everything through the eyes of love, which is one of the things I just adore about you, is that when people come to you with what is or what appears to be, that you seem to have a way to translate that into a loving version of that happening or that history into how this serves. Does that come natural, or is that coming from your connection to source? How do you have that perspective?
It's a connection to source. Yeah, it didn't come naturally for me because we live in a fear-based reality. Our natural default is to go into fear, and blame is a fear-based vibration. Judgment is a fear-based vibration. Shame, guilt, all of those are based in fear. So when I started understanding this, my own transcendence process, as Spirit had me call it, is about recognizing how all of those are fear-based. And so it's still a process. I sit and look at them like, okay, am I looking at this through the eyes of judgment, or am I looking at it through the eyes of fear? Right. Or am I looking at this through the eyes of love? Because ultimately love really is all that is. It is the stuff that all of us are made of. Right. And we go back to our ancient texts, and our ancient texts all say God is love. Period. Right. I am that I am. Right. And so if we can then learn to see everything that's happening in our experience, as I call that, the storm that's swirling around us, and try to see that from the higher perspective, then we can move through it, because this is the necessary breakdown. Right. This breakdown is necessary for us to move in to the breakthrough into the love-based reality that we all want to create.
Right, right. Well, the thing also that I find that's very, very important that you teach and you exemplify is the fact that we are empowered to make these choices rather than we're trapped. I think so many people feel victimized by their construct, and the fact that you broke free, and freedom is a big part of your message. Could you talk a little bit about that and share with our audience?
Yeah, freedom is the entire purpose behind my message.
Yes.
Yeah. And it took me a while to grasp that. So my entire purpose on the planet, in every one of my human expressions, has been about freedom. That is who I am. So right now, my role on the planet is spiritual freedom. And ultimately, all freedoms are spiritual freedoms, because we are all spirit having a human experience.
Right, right.
So, financial freedom is spiritual freedom. Right. Right. Because it's lifting the heart of the encumbrances that come with indebtedness. So it is a spiritual freedom. Right. All of it is. And ultimately, it's about how we perceive our reality. So every single person has their own perspective of what appears to be real. Right. So no one person's perspective is right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It's just different. And so part of that is understanding we need to start having these conversations. What's happened the past couple of years is that people are no longer allowed to have conversations with differing viewpoints. Well, what happens is it's as though as soon as anyone comes near people's boundaries, instead of them being curious about the reaction, because a lot of times it's visceral, the reaction. Mm-hmm. When somebody says something, it's shocking, it's physical. But instead of just pushing back, wondering what that was, because everything I believe is a gift,
but what you're seeing is high conflict. Is you're seeing that people aren't open to those discussions to learn from each other.
Yeah, so part of that is, so the fourth dimension converged with the third dimension in 2012, and the fourth dimension is very emotional.
Right.
So people right now are very emotionally driven. And I was also being shown that it would create a duality reality, which is why we're seeing so much duality right now.
Right.
It is up to us to rise above the duality and to move out of emotion, which is heart-based. So the heart is being activated more than ever before. Mm-hmm. It's about moving into the higher heart and being open and willing to have these conversations with people who don't agree with us.
Right.
Because the only way we are going to collectively move past this storm that we're in is if we have the consciousness to sit down and have conversations collectively to move through what we're going through. And right now, what the consciousness is of conflict, and nothing beautiful and light and loving comes out of conflict.
Right.
And when you move past the conflict. So we need to be willing to have these really difficult conversations.
Well, the conversations, I think what's happening is that people are starting to question everything. So, and that's how I thought all of this was going to occur. I mean, I was aware that we were going to go through this big change, and I knew that there would be a lot of people that their truths would be shattered. Their programming from their parents, God loved them. They didn't do it in harm, it with evil intentions, but it's just the way that it's almost like it's a game. How the game was played was you chose your family to teach you these things so you'd have this perspective so you could see if you could grow with this perspective, right?
Right, absolutely. So that's one of the things that a lot of people tend to forget is that we chose this experience.
Right.
So rather than looking at the experience with the eyes of anger and resentment and judgment and hatred, look at the experience and say, that's right, I chose this experience. And how many of us came in to shine light on the experience so that we can change it? Well, so yeah, a lot of people are going to have their belief systems shattered.
Right, right.
Because, and I call them hand-me-down beliefs.
Oh, that's perfect.
And they're it's like a pair of old jeans, right? They're worn out and they're comfortable, or an old pair of shoes. They're worn out and they're comfortable, but at some point they start falling apart. And at some point we got to let them go because they're falling apart. Right. As comfortable as they are. So I think that's what we're going to be moving into, and to understand that they're falling apart because you're getting a new pair of jeans.
Right. Well, that's the whole thing about all of this, is that, laugh before you leap. Well, people are afraid to leap. People are afraid to leap to the better version of themselves, and this has been going on. All of the self-help people and the personal development people have talked about this for 100 years.
Yeah.
Think and Go Rich and all of the As a Man Thinketh. Basically, we are creating our reality, and whether or not we react to something that's in our field or not gives us a chance to see what we choose. We are in control, even though everything seems out of control. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit. How do you see people learning how to be more in their hearts and in control, so that when things happen around them, their triggers are activated, they don't overreact? How do you see that changing?
Part of the issue that I see is that too many people expect someone at the top to fix it for them.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Right? And that's where we've been. We vote for our politicians, assuming that they're going to take care of it for us. And what this year, what Spirit has made very, very clear to me, that now more than ever before in this new reality we're creating, which started December 21st, 2020. Like, we are now locked and loaded into the age of Aquarius. We need to stop expecting somebody else to fix it for us.
Right.
Daddy's not going to fix it for us. It's up to every single one of us to take ownership of it as our role. The president's not going to fix it for us. The queen's not going to fix it for us. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Right.
And finally, I think the whole of humanity is going to start grasping that.
Yes.
Because in the spiritual community, we've been saying that. For how many years has in the spiritual community we've been saying, we are the ones we've been waiting for. Be the change we want to see in the world. Well, what's happened in the last couple of months is we are the ones we've been waiting for. And we need to be the change we want to see in the world. Yes. And that's different than what a lot of the spiritual community has been doing for the last 10 years, is just sitting back quietly in their space, being the love and being the light while the storms rolled around, which was vitally important. Not to discount how incredibly important that's been for humanity, because you know that it's always darkest before the dawn kind of thing. So the dawn has happened. We are now in the light of day. Is starting to happen. We needed masses of humanity to sit back and be the love and be the light, and to hold that love and that light space to be able to move through that darkest part. What we need now is humanity to actively be the love and actively be the light. Well, not just sit back in our quiet space and la.
Well, I think the other part of this, I would just want to add to it, because I agree wholeheartedly with everything you're saying. I think the challenge, or the possibility, or I shouldn't use challenge, the opportunity for growth for all of us.
I love that. I love that reframing.
Including me, I'm certainly including myself, is to walk our talk. Mm-hmm. Because when we find triggers, we find things that need to be healed. And to be actively curious and working on when we do have a button push, when we flare up in anger, when we see that we have judgment or we have spiritual arrogance, which, you know, I mean, I'm sorry, this is what these thoughts that come through, and you have to go, whoa, that's not who I am. That's not who how my heart wants to express. But that's as important as holding the space in a cave of high frequency to be part of the frequency of the grid of the earth. That's just as important as showing up perfectly human, which means we're going to still have whatever, but to show up in authenticity. That's another thing that I think you can help a lot of people do. Can you talk about authenticity a little bit? Because that's truth. That's their truth.
Yeah. So one thing that was coming in just before I talk about authenticity, which was, you know, a huge buzzword I started hearing about 10 years ago. So let's just go back for just 1 second to being the love and being the light. Anybody can be the light and love wandering through the desert. Anybody can be the light and love sitting in a cave. Anybody can be the light and love sitting on a mountaintop, right? It's easy to be that when we're sitting in our own little private space.
Right.
It's another thing to be the love and light actively when you're out there actually doing divinely guided work. So say, I'll take Yeshua, Jesus, for example. He could be the love and the light wandering in the desert and finding himself. He chose to actively be that by going out into his community, standing on the street corners and teaching, even when people were throwing emotional daggers at him.
Right.
I guarantee you there were people, we know that there were people who hated what he was teaching, and he still held that loving, even with the proverbial stones and swords being thrown at him. That's what I'm talking about when I say to be willing to be in it, even in the storm.
Okay. Well, and being that I think that's what this whole lockdown period has been, is the chance you go inward and see what your truth is, work on yourself, because all of the loving essence has to be nurtured through self-love first, to see who you are really as a piece of source, and to go back to that expression. Without a near-death experience is okay.
Preferably, yes.
And then express that, and I'm physically aware of people's light bodies. That's how I recognized you. I mean, I physically feel and realize when people are emanating light. And that's what we're all being. It's like a, whatever you call it, the crank to turn it up on your light switch.
Yeah, actually what I'm seeing is like a burner on the stove.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking of a dimmer light.
Oh, okay.
We're all, because our body, our electrical system has a capacity, if all of the chakras are working correctly, and if our systems are working in unison, to be projecting light out into the space, into the ethers. And the more congruent we are, the more discordant energies are released and transformed into more light. And that's where you see all of the ancient religious artifacts that have all of the apostles and Jesus and all the saints and Mother Mary. All of them have this beautiful light body, basically. Right? That's what I think is happening. That's what I really feel. But you have to be free. So your message, you cannot activate your light body and be that in the world without the self-love and the freedom activated.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's basically the same thing, because the more we let go of the more we let go of who we are not,
right,
the more we come back to the loving essence of who we actually are. So, we are all divine love having a human experience. So the more we start to peel off the layers of that, everything that is not divine love having a human experience, the more we come back to the truth of who we are. So we're not actually trying to change ourselves. We're not in the business of changing ourselves. We're in the business of re-becoming who we always were.
Remembering.
Yeah, remembering. And I use that term of remembering. It's re-membering. It's basically bringing the member of who we are back into the wholeness. It's remembering any broken aspects, any disowned aspects, and bringing them back into our whole. So we're basically, it's like having any broken members of our body, remembering them into our whole being.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so everyone, you can hear that Victoria has a very important piece of this puzzle for you. If you are attracted to this way of using language in a very precise way that calls in what you really want versus what you don't, and the idea that freedom is a primal key to open up and unlock your blessings, your gifts. Correct?
Yeah. Well, freedom is actually, freedom of choice is the prime directive on our planet.
Right.
It is. That is built into the human experience. It's really our primary human right is freedom above all other things.
So you did mention before that you are getting support from the unseen ones. And when I met you, I knew you were an angel. You are an Elohim angel. And I don't know if you even knew it back then.
Did you? I did. Oh yeah. I just haven't been very willing to say it because it's so crazy.
Well, but you didn't tell me.
No, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell you until a couple of years ago. Yeah, but I've known it since 2011.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so I recognized it. I don't know that I named it either, but I knew I could feel and sense that you were angelic. And the journey, there's probably a lot of people on here that have had either lifetimes as angels or working with angels, or not that many angels actually come into human form. A lot of times they're on the sideline. They help humans, but you actually came here as, and I don't want to use this word, but it's the only word I can think of, as a warrior. So could you talk about that a little bit? Or are you comfortable talking about that?
I am.
Okay.
I am, yeah. So, but it's a different kind of warrior. So one of the things I started to understand about 10 years ago was that Archangel Michael has let me borrow his sword of truth.
Uh-huh.
But a warrior now is different than what we tend to think of a warrior being. Okay. I'm not here to slay, well, proverbial dragons maybe, but but there's no death that is involved with this, unless it's the death of deception. But it isn't. See, warriors of light are here to bring light.
Right.
That's what we're here for. And I use this term all the time of taking up arms, but taking up arms isn't the way we have looked at it with, I'm going to take up my gun and take up my arms and go to battle. This is about taking up arms as in locking arm in arm with our other light workers. So we become an army of light workers by locking arms. It's not taking up guns and swords, and it's a completely different look at what it means to be a warrior.
Well, I think it's also that it's what you're offering is a way to hold, and again, it's about I go back to integrity and authenticity. By you being a spiritual warrior, it's more that your spiritual commitment is to hold the light for yourself and as many others as possible, not to fight, which fighting for good is still fighting. It's the old message that
right.
On the page, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
in the past, fighting has meant being against something. What are you fighting against? And I've had this conversation with people in the last year because there is so much againstness right now.
Right.
And it isn't about what are we fighting against. It's about what are we fighting for.
Exactly.
So let's forget about what we're fighting against. Because as long as we focus on what we don't want, we're going to keep getting more of what we don't want.
Right. That's right.
And as long as we resist, right, what we resist persists. Exactly. So let's get out of againstness and get out of resistance and hold in what it is we want. What is the world we want to create? What's the vision that I have for myself and I have for humanity? When enough of us focus on that, and that be what we're fighting for, what we don't want will disappear.
Exactly.
Because it must.
You're right.
It's one of the universal laws.
Exactly.
That we create what we focus on. So as us all becoming warriors of light, that's what it's about.
Perfect.
It's about being a warrior for the world we want to create.
So I want to explain part of the reason why I'm so excited about Victoria being my friend is that Victoria, just we're going to go to your history so people can understand what the perspective that you have. So Victoria grew up in a cult and she escaped it at 14 or
17.
17. Oh yeah, that's right. That's when you...
Yeah, I wanted to escape before that, but it took me a while to figure out how.
Okay. Well, so do you want to tell a little bit of that story and then we can talk about that video you did with Charlie after that as a segue?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, I grew up in a cult in Montana, and the primary oh, what did they call it? It's like the rule. It is the prime directive, okay, of that particular community was polygamy. And I always have to clarify because people just assume that it's a Utah thing. This was Montana, not Utah, although it was correlated to a group in Utah. And I was taught that men can't get to heaven unless they have at least 3 wives, and women can't get to heaven unless her husband has at least 3 wives, and if the man deems her worthy. So a woman can't basically get into heaven unless she kisses her husband's feet and does everything for him, and he deems her worthy. So it was an incredibly subservient environment for female and incredibly patriarchal. So one of my personal battles, has been learning to not hold againstness toward the patriarchy, because there was so much of that and it was so embedded in my childhood.
Right.
I ended up leaving as a teenager. A lot of trauma existed in that environment, sexual assaults, and but what it really was more than anything was an insult to my soul.
Right.
And I didn't really understand that later, why this just did not resonate with me. Because a lot of the kids I grew up with, they're still there.
Right.
What was different about me was that I couldn't stay there. It felt so out of alignment with what was best for me, even when I didn't know that's the terminology for what it was. Even as a little girl, and I would ask my parents, because every person in the community was part of that same religion. And I would ask people, and the adults didn't have answers for me. Even as a little girl, I would have spiritual questions they couldn't answer for me. And they looked at me like I was crazy when my spiritual ideas didn't match theirs. I remember saying something to my mom one time, and she's like, where on earth did you get that idea from? I told her one time when I was a kid, I said, Mom, I said, not planet Earth, I call it that now. I said, Earth is like a school. It's like school for the souls. We come here to learn and then we leave. And she was like, that's nuts. Where did you get that idea from? And I was like, I don't know, it just makes sense to me. So I would think about spiritual concepts, and I would see the discrepancies and the dichotomies that were built into the belief system that just did not make sense to me as a kid. So as a teenager, I finally just decided that I needed to leave. Now, part of that was because of some very, very, very painful things that had happened to me physically, that I either needed to commit suicide or I needed to figure out how to leave. But either way, I needed to be out of that community.
Right.
And that way it presented itself.
You're also about to get married. If you didn't leave at 17, you were in trouble.
Yeah. So my dad promised me to a friend of his when I was 11.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I was terrified that he was going to make me marry this guy who was just such a creep. And I had a conversation a couple of days ago from a girl that I grew up with, and I told her what my dad had done, and she was like, oh my gosh, that guy is so gross. and
Thank goodness, it's perfect. That's why you made sure you left.
Yeah. And there was always that underlying fear that my dad would do that, because he had done that to my older sister. He had married my older sister off to some next door guy that was, twice her age, as a multiple wife. And this particular guy would have ended up being his 3rd wife. And I couldn't do that. And I ended up in Utah. And I had my first spiritual awakening then. I got introduced to the Centers for Spiritual Living, and that's where I got introduced to self-help books. So I've been on the self-help book path since 1987.
Wow.
And then I had another big jump in 2009.
So how did you end up getting to California? And I mean, did you feel like you had to keep running? Like they would try to find you, or did you?
No. There is a part of me that is incredibly adventurous.
Oh.
So people would say to me, oh that takes so much courage to leave home. And I never thought it that way. I was like, I'm off on the next adventure. I would just get in my car and drive places. And so that's how I ended up in California. I just got in my car and drove to California. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. I just came to California. And that's just kind of how I was when I was younger. I forgot how to be that way until 6 months ago.
Yeah.
When I chose to leave my husband. And it was that same kind of thing of, somewhere in there is that part of me that knows that no matter what I choose, I'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I moved through life in my 20s was I'm going to go here and somehow I know things will work themselves out. And they always did.
It's perfect. Okay. So you go to California, you meet your husband, you have 2 beautiful children, and you have a life, and you have been activated over and over. As I've known you, I've just watched you blossom. It's so cool from this side of the I don't know what it's like inside there, but it's beautiful to watch. You evolve. Yes, it's been amazing. So could you give us a little bit more about that story about going to be, because you're still free, but you're a parent. So
yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, that was difficult because I had this like incongruence. There was one part of me that's incredibly adventurous and needs to be free and needs to be independent because independence has been a driving force through my entire life.
Right.
And then the other part of me that has a husband and kids and felt a little bit trapped. So there's multiple sides to every story. And I constantly was going back and forth between this like inner incongruence of feeling trapped in a marriage that was not as loving as I would have preferred. I couldn't have spiritual conversations with him because he and I did not see eye to eye spiritually. And then being a full-time mom and raising my kids and volunteering at school. And I'm so incredibly grateful that my husband made the kind of money for me to be able to be that kind of mom. Although being a mom was not on my wish list. You know, after growing up and seeing all these women who that's all I was told growing up, but the only purpose for my existence was to get married and have kids. So in my 20s, I was like, no way, I am not going to have kids. Like that was not even in my, I mean, some people say that's just, they knew since they were a kid, they wanted to grow up and be a mom and have kids. I'm just like, that to me was what losers do in my perspective. But I ended up at 35 having that conversation with myself of, okay, I'm kind of getting up there. Do I want kids or not? So for me, this was, I don't want to get to the end of my life and have regrets. If I got to the end of my life, would I regret not ever having children?
Right.
And that's actually what made the decision for me. I said, you know what, I might actually regret that. Plus, wow. I think it'd be really good. Plus, there was a part of me that knew I was going to be a really good mom because I mean, I knew when I was 8 years old how to be a mom, right. Changing diapers and all that. And what I discovered from that is the tremendous gift that came with being a mom, because my kids taught me what love really is.
Right. Well, and it also is your nurturing muscle. Your nurturing muscle for what you do now, helping other people, probably a lot of that came from working with your children and learning patience and composure, and also bringing out their light, helping them be the best they can be, because now you offer that to others.
And compassion. So the way that I grew up, there was I had no concept of compassion.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was this environment I grew up in. I didn't know what love was. I didn't know what compassion was. I never felt love from my family. I never felt love from my parents. I never felt love in this community. People just got married because they were assigned in marriage. There was no love. And in a very uncompassionate environment. I mean, we raised our own animals, but people killed animals like it was nothing.
Wow.
They were, kids were horribly hurtful to each other. I was telling someone the other day that I got used for target practice, and the boys didn't think anything about that, shooting me with BB guns and slingshots and throwing rocks at me because I was just a stupid girl.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I had no concept of compassion until I had kids, and that opened up the compassion muscle inside of me.
Beautiful. That's
and I'm also here as a representative of the divine feminine. And had I not had children and learned how to love my children the way that the divine feminine loves us, I would not be able to do that level of work.
right.
So I'm glad that my kids pushed their way through because they kind of had to do that.
Well, it's still perfect. Everything's in divine order, so everything's perfect. But I wanted people to understand your journey so that when we talk about your conversation with Charlie, that they have a reason to understand it. So do you feel that your rebirth, because you had to rebirth yourself too, and again, 6 months ago you did it again, but I've been watching, you and I started talking almost every day during the very first part of COVID. You and I were on Zoom talking, supporting each other with the energy. And it was really interesting to watch both of us we were not in fear, we were in curiosity. Mm-hmm. It was like, yep, game's on. Now what do we do?
Yeah. So the message I got at the very beginning of that is that us going behind closed doors was so incredibly important for all of humanity. And the message that came in with that was, be still and know that I am.
Perfect.
So we all had to go inside. Not just go inside our houses, but it required us all to go within. So it's been a very necessary part of our human experience to go inside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Be reminded that the inside makes the outside.
Mm-hmm.
That.
Yeah, and then we would cut. You know what's really funny? I saw it just as I popped on Facebook to get the link to be on this. It showed me you know how Facebook does the memories from previous years. It showed the memory from 1 year ago. Oh. 1 year ago today was when I launched my new show.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this is about this time period is, I mean, such a gift in so many ways. And using technology is helping us all find each other, to support each other and to learn from each other the different facets and perspectives that are part of the New Earth puzzle, I guess is.
Yeah. Well, we're creating community in a completely different way.
Exactly.
We're creating a global community rather than the meeting in person community. So, one of the things I tell people is getting on camera has been really, really good for people, because how many people were camera shy?
Right.
We're no longer camera shy because we have to meet on camera. Yeah. 10 years ago, people were terrified at the idea of looking at a camera. Now it's like, we all do it every day.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's creating a new way for us to communicate. Mm-hmm. So we might not be communicating in person, but it's creating a whole new way for us to communicate, which is really, really important, because in the past 10 years, I actually gave a speech about 10 years ago about how at some point human beings would want to start meeting in person again, because social media allowed people to hide behind text.
Oh.
And what the camera has done is it's forced us to no longer hide behind text and start having real conversations again.
Beautiful, beautiful. And the conversations, again, what we talked about at the very beginning, we're elevating everything out of this polarity conversations where there's such dramatic positions that people are taking to the let's see where we can meet in the middle, where this 0 point, and who was it? It was someone that I worked with was talking about divine masculine, divine feminine, and then in the middle is the divine child.
Oh, I think that's Shirley.
Shirley, yeah. Yes. And so what we're looking at is that we've been in this high polarity, but where we're going is this 0 point center, the teeter-totter, mm-hmm. and changing and being that innocence of that divine child, and doing it together. that's the potential, right?
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing. And some of us started seeing this a few years ago, that alliances were coming and co-ops were coming. And
Right.
so collaboration is the bridge between competition and cooperation. So there are enough of us who have started moving forward in this consciousness that we're starting to create co-ops.
Right. That's like
the alliances and co-ops are going to be the new reality that we're creating, and all of that is working together,
right,
for a greater purpose.
Right, uplifting everyone. It's not about. I mean, when you were saying something about being on camera, when I first started this show 2 years ago, it was never about how I looked. It was like, it's all about focusing and bringing in the other person. So, I mean, I'll look at some of them and go, ooh, should I fix my hair? Or it's like, oh, maybe I better lose some weight. But anyway, but it's really about how do we shine the light and uplift others, right?
Right. Oh, and that's the other thing too that being on camera has done, which I think has been great, is it has lessened the judgment about physical appearance.
Yes.
It's now allowing people to show up more as who they really are.
Right.
And to show up on camera with hair mess and no makeup and, reading glasses on, and to be completely okay with that.
Right.
It has really, really helped to break down the judgments of how we expect someone on camera to look.
Well, well, that's this authentic expression that social media started. I think the internet in general is training wheels for telepathy. And I think that what we're doing is we're first cleaning up, because to have telepathy without us cleaning up our inner work would be kind of harsh. And giving us magic powers to co-create with the universe at a high level without cleaning our stuff up is very harsh.
Yeah, I don't want anybody going in there and reading my junk. Clean as much junk out as I can before I let somebody else in my head.
That's why I was saying that when you do get triggered, it's actually a gift. It's a gift for you, but you have to create the space to process it. You have to make it a priority to not just go past it and not examine it when you have a trigger, when you have a judgment that seems out of alignment with love, right?
Right. And I think the word you used was it divine curiosity? Yeah, I love that. And it's about being willing to say when something upsets us, what is this? What is this all about? What is this really all about? And why is this happening? Not from the old, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
But stopping and saying, why is this happening? Same question, but from a completely different perspective.
Yes. And we want to encourage everyone to, if you don't have a process to do that, to connect with Victoria and see how she could help you come to these new conclusions and see yourself in a different light. The pathway is available, very available now. And a lot of times all you need is a guide and someone to hold your hand and validate what you already know, right?
Yeah. And then there is a process to be able to move through, because we all have stories. There's a process to move through those stories, to get through every one of those stories to a place of unconditional love about the story itself and everyone involved in that story.
Right. Well,
so then we have the memory and we have the lesson, but we don't have the negative attachments anymore.
Well, I think that's the absence. It's more than just forgiveness. It's actually forgiveness is the first step. So A Course in Miracles and Ho'oponopono and all of those processes that have you forgive. I love all of that. But then it seems like it needs then the next process of gratitude, where there's this gratitude or appreciation, because that somehow serves. And I know that sounds harsh to people that haven't been able to forgive, that and anytime you feel that something serves you that was horrible, but it's almost like you're going into hindsight, you're going into the future state and seeing what the gift was.
Yeah. So I have it a little bit differently in that I have begin with gratitude, but gratitude is twofold. So I have begin with gratitude, then practice forgiveness, and then going into another phase that I call embracing the struggles, which is about taking gratitude to a whole nother level, which is what you were talking about.
Oh, okay.
So first you have, gratitude. It's like a surface gratitude, learning how to see everything in the present through the eyes of gratitude, because gratitude opens the window for everything else. Gratitude shifts consciousness faster than anything else. So gratitude actually opens, it's like it opens it's kind of like fear looks like a pyramid and love looks like a vessel, although they're technically intermixed, but that's a whole nother conversation. But at the very, very bottom of that is that constriction that fear causes, and all of the fear-based beliefs that are the very that's the very bottom essence of humanity. That's why it's cold and it's dark and it's lonely and it's depressive and it's constricting. That's all the stuff that's based in fear.
Right.
What gratitude does is it opens a gateway to start spiraling up the spiritual spiral to unconditional love.
Perfect.
So begin with gratitude.
Okay.
That starts the entire process. And then you can move into forgiveness and self-forgiveness, which is, I would say self-forgiveness is the most powerful tool in my toolbox. Begin with gratitude to open the doorway, and then you go into self-forgiveness. And through self-forgiveness, we can automatically start the forgiveness of others, because we can see it from a completely different perspective through self-forgiveness.
Right.
Well, then there's that another level, what I call embrace the struggles, which is learning how to be grateful for the most painful parts of our story, the most painful experiences in our life. And when we start to move into embracing and accepting and even elevating the reason for the painful experience, it allows the attachments to completely fall away.
Perfect.
And through that process, we experience spiritual freedom.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. And I hope people will go to Victoria's website. It's victoriareynolds.com. It's a beautiful site. She has a free gift on the front page of one of her books. Do you want to explain a little bit about your free gift?
Yeah, so my free gift is a book I just wrote in November. It's not that I wrote it in November. It was an idea that I've had for, how books work. They sit up here for a long time. It finally landed on paper in November. And it is a book all about what's presently happening on the planet. So the book is called Rise Up, A Simplified Guide to the Great Awakening, Spiritual Revolution, and the Ascension. So for people who don't understand, we are actually in the Great Awakening right now. We are in the Ascension right now. And spiritual revolution, again, going back to the term of warrior, isn't about fighting against. It's a misperception of what the word revolution means. Revolution actually means to turn again.
Right.
To make another turn. So we're making another turn up the spiritual spiral collectively. This book is all about what's presently happening. What makes it unique is that I have an entire chapter dedicated to terminology.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. It's dedicated to terminology, and it is intended to be a bridge for the spiritual community and the religious community to come together and realize that we're actually in the same. That's funny. We're in the same boat, floating up the same stream, rather than this againstness. So I came to understand that being. What is that word that I used at the beginning that I came here to? Is not about being against religion, but it's about taking on religion. It's not an againstness at all. And I had to get to a point where I no longer held resentment against religion to begin talking about religion from a spiritual perspective.
Right. Well, you you call yourself Illuminary, so you're shedding light on what is in a path to a much happier ending. The much more elevated and loving and joyful experience here on the planet.
Right.
Well, we only have about 5 more minutes. Would you want to talk about your video with Charlie still, or should we do this again?
Oh, we can always do it again. I'm going to be on his show again April 2nd.
Okay. Well, what I'm referring to for the people in the audience that don't know, Victoria was in a interview with Charlie Ward, and for any of you that are following some of the possible changes that are happening in the whole earth economy and politics, Charlie Ward is a resource that a lot of people look to for finding out what's really happening. And Victoria and Charlie had a conversation because both of them grew up in a cult. So with that lead-in, do you want to?
Yeah. So what was funny about that is we discovered that we were both growing up in cults at the same time on opposite sides of the planet. So he grew up in England in this teeny tiny cult, and it was just fascinating. We're like, oh, we need to have this discussion again, because we both had the same experience of after leaving and not having a clue how to navigate the real world. And so that was a really interesting conversation. Charlie, what I would call him, is one of the leaders in the movement for planetary freedom.
Perfect.
So there are a bunch of us who are here for fighting for the freedom of humanity out of this fear-based reality we've been living in. So for people who want to see that interview, if you go to my personal website, which is on the screen here, and if you find, I think it's there's a link in a couple of places on my website that says YouTube, but that'll take you straight to my YouTube channel. I have 3 different YouTube channels, but I try to like converge them all into this one, which is my personal YouTube channel, which is Victoria M. Reynolds. But the easiest way to find it is by going to my website first and just clicking on the YouTube link. It'll take people straight to my YouTube channel.
Well, and I want to recommend your YouTube channel and all of your YouTubes anyway. You're doing an interview show, and you're doing the interviews with other people, and you're offering spiritual upliftment short videos as well on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's I ended up with 3 different channels. So I have Fearless and Free TV. That started out just as me reading channeled messages a year ago. And then Spirit started guiding me into interviewing other people. So that's kind of become more of a place where I interview other spiritually gifted people. Then I have my regular channel that's been sitting dormant for about 6 years. Wow. I brought back to life, and I'm doing like little short teaching videos.
You're great.
That started on Sunday, my Spirit Lift show. And that's going to be just for lifting people's spirits.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, everyone in the audience, I hope you'll start watching Victoria's work and following her and see her as a powerful resource for you, because this is the path to full expression in your divine nature, is by following and becoming free. And Victoria has so many ways that you can work with her. She also has books that are coming out left and right soon. So what I want you to know is that this information and this resonance is available for everyone now. And Victoria could be a teacher that you could follow, that could get you to the path to who you are and sharing your divine nature faster. So that's my.
And I want to add, if you guys have questions that you want to have answered, shoot me those questions, because if you have that question, I guarantee you there are people all over the planet who have the same question. So, and that gives me content to be able to share and to put those messages out there. So if you have questions, please send them to me. Send them like comments on my send them to me on my website, which is just connect@victoriareynolds.com, or on my other YouTube. I read all the comments on my YouTube videos, so I read all those. So if you have other topics you want me to cover, I'll do that for you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for everything you do in the world. Thank you for being my friend.
Thank you. You just delight me every time. Yeah. I mention you all the time. Kathy Mason.
Well, it's because we recognized each other. That's all. I mean, and I know I was highly intimidated when I met you in that workshop. I actually went back and did another one of those workshops. I felt like I needed to get what he was offering, and I did. I did end up getting on TV and everything, but
and it did work. I ended up getting on TV.
Yeah, it did work, but anyway. Okay. Well, thank you all, and thank you. Please follow Victoria. Check her out on Facebook. Go to her website and check out all the ways that you can work with her, and watch what she's doing. She's bringing in amazing stuff right now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Love you.
I've decided I can no longer afford to play small, so I'm out of the spiritual closet.
You were never playing small. You just now are claiming it.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Gotta go. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mwah.